The talk that I have to share with you today is a modification or a revisit of a talk that I gave, I don't know, I think 2 years or more ago. But it kept calling me and has revisited the talk and have added a lot to it. And it comes from a place within me that I have kind of discovered about myself in this new journey that I'm on at the apartment complex and all of the complexities of that, and finding that there's just an overwhelming need for for silence in my life. Um, there just seems to be a whole lot of noise going on in the world right now. Do you hear it? I'm sure you do. Perhaps not where we are gathered here today, but noise is everywhere. Sometimes deafening, but it's also overwhelmingly loud noise. We hear it everywhere. And to a certain degree of truth, we cannot escape it, nor can we outrun it, it seems. We hear the noise and the traffic. We hear it as the airplanes or helicopters fly overhead. We hear it in the distant sirens that signal there's trouble or tragedy somewhere. We hear it in the thunder of the storm. We hear it on our cell phones, beeping notifications of a text or an email, an incoming phone call, or something that someone's posted on Facebook and other mediums of social media. It's everywhere. We even hear it now, and especially in the morning or the nightly news. Noise, noise. Just last night, I was sitting outside in the pavilion of my apartment, and the noise was rampant. Some 100 yards or so away from where I was sitting, one of the major roads coming into the city. Cars, trucks, buzzing by, one after the other. I couldn't escape it. There's an airport just a few miles away from where I live. And even at midnight, there was a plane taking off or landing, or buzzing around in the sky. As I was contemplating this talk, I heard what I thought were gunshots, and maybe they were. Then they were followed by the unmistakable sound of fireworks in the middle of the night. Noise. As I walked back to my apartment, an old cowboy song came to my mind. Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam and the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day, where the air is so pure, the zephyrs so free, the breezes so balmy and light, that I would not exchange my home on the range for all of the cities so bright. The red man was pressed from this part of the West. He's likely no more to return to the banks of the Red River, where seldom, if ever, their flickering campfires burn. And how often at night, when the heavens are bright with the light from the glittering stars, have I stood there amazed and asked as I gazed if their glory exceeds that of our own home, home on the range. But in the presence of all of this noise, and it's statistically proven that we often find an elevation of fear or anxiety, disconnect, isolation, unsettledness. Perhaps we've just grown used to or complacent in the presence of the noise, but its effects are deafening. Another challenge that we face is most of us are just uncomfortable in the presence or the midst of silence. We've all experienced it. That awkward moment when in a conversation or a phone call and the conversation fades to silence. What do I say next to bring the conversation back to continuity? What do I do to keep the conversation flowing? We've all experienced that uncomfortable angst in the present moment of silence. But the truth is, there is a certain serenity in the presence of silence. There is a reconnect of the disconnect of the silence. Researching this talk, I came across an article written by Meil Landau, who is an award-winning author on mindfulness and spirituality. And she puts the essence of silence this way. Silence, she says, is the language of the soul. While we can connect ourselves and our higher self in spoken tongues, most notably through singing or chanting or prayer and loving speech, the fastest route to inner peace is our outer stillness. That is because God, Source, Spirit, is always whispering to us, but we must quiet our mind to hear. Being quiet, not doing quiet, allows us to hear the hum of the universe we too often drown out with the louder and harsher thoughts in our head. Continues. Many of us are uncomfortable around silence, treating as though it were an enemy in need of conquer. If a room is quiet when we enter, we may reflexively turn on the TV or the music or pick up the phone or even talk to ourselves, as I often do, to fill the void. She confirms and agrees that when we are with others for more than a few minutes without conversation, it begins to make us squirm. But you can transform silence into the most freeing experience of the day. For being quiet, silence helps us to settle into a peaceful state, and it deepens interpersonal connections. If you observe silence with a loved one or your whole family, it helps everyone be more observant of one another's needs. To use touch as a form of communication, and to ponder our later answers rather than blurting out the first mindless response that strikes us. Even our ancestors knew and understood the virtue and value of silence. Charles Alexander Eastman, a Santee Sioux, whose native name was Ohisia, wrote about the serenity of silence in one of his many books, The Heart of an Indian. He said, if you ask him, that is the Indian, what is silence? He will answer, it is the great mystery. The holy silence is his voice. And if you ask what are the fruits of silence, he will say that they are self-control, true courage, endurance, patience, dignity, and reverence. That is important to read and hear especially considering who this man really was. He was the poster child of Senator Henry Dawes and his insistence of the red man receiving a white man's education. Dawes was essentially the leading proponent of the Indian boarding schools, such as the one that Eastman attended, Carlisle Indian School. At that time, the attitude and prejudice towards the Indian was shown in the devastating conclusion of Captain Richard Henry Pratt, who said, "Kill the Indian and save the man." Well, not only did Charles Eastman graduate from the Carlisle School, he went on to college and then to medical school and became the first Native American to receive his medical doctoral degree. Eastman was the attending physician on the Pine Ridge Reservation when on December 29th of 1890, an assembly of the 7th Cavalry engaged in the deadliest mass shooting in American history, the Wounded Knee Massacre, when and where nearly 300 Lakota people were shot and killed, mostly women and children and the elders, most shot in their back as they attempted to flee the onslaught of the massacre. Can you imagine the noise? I really don't want to. The sounds of gunfire and Hotchkiss mountain guns, the horror in the midst of all of that noise and violence, where in just minutes it was all over. It's been said that the Wounded Knee Massacre was the final arrow that broke the back of the Red Nation. The wounded were brought in to the Pine Ridge Reservation, where this man, Charles Eastman, tended to the torn bodies, doing his best to save them, all by himself. Incredibly, he would later write that the wise man believes profoundly in silence, the sign of a perfect equilibrium. For silence is the absolute poise or balance of mind and body. The man who preserves his selfhood, ever calm and unshaken by the storms of his existence, his, in the minds of the unlettered sage, is the ideal attitude and conduct of life. Silence is the cornerstone of character. When I stop and think about the horrors and the tragedies he experienced along his journey, I find it rather remarkable that this man could write such profound and sacred words, pass that wisdom down to generations who would follow, and now to the 7th generation. Indeed, silence is a cornerstone of character. I tell you these things not to revisit the horror and tragedy of the Red Nation. I speak only to honor and show respect and gratitude towards our ancestors, only to remember their wisdom sent down to all generations, past, present, and future. Father Richard Rohr, a brilliant author and naturalist, in one of his daily devotions, put it this way: many of us have a sense of self-identity created to our relationship to ideas, and thoughts, and words, noise. We can spend our whole lives rattling ideas inside of our head, rarely touching upon what's just right in front of us. We're fixated on our computers, smartphones, news feeds, email, social media, and selfies. We don't even realize the disconnect and how we have disconnected ourselves from the only world that people have lived in most of human history. One of the reasons, I think, for our sense of isolation and sometimes unhappiness is that we've lost our contact with that. We've lost our connection to the natural world where there is no theology, no religion to agree or disagree with. We don't have to identify as a Presbyterian, Baptist, Lutheran, Christian, with Judaism or Buddhism or any other expression of religion or spirituality, male or female, conservative or progressive. Really, there is nothing to argue about. It is in and through contact with the natural world that all of the givens, that which has been available to every creature and being that has been birthed through the sacred breath of Creator since the beginning of time. And that there we will find certain truths and something that is indeed a given, upon which we can stand and rely upon and depend on. I guess in the spiritual world, we would call that the serenity of silence and the grace that follows and flows from that realization. We simply have to find the silence. And there we will discover the serenity that it produces in the midst of a world, a generation that seldom hears not the voice of Creator in a world full of noise. Every day, we are given a natural way to reconnect with one another as well as Creator itself. And it does not depend upon intelligence or politics, education, or any religion. It depends on really being present and connecting with the soul. And the only way we will ever find and experience that serenity is in the presence and sacredness of silence, even as our ancestors have taught and continues to remind us of that wisdom. Often I like to spend mornings outside watching the sunrise with a good cup of coffee. My prayer time and moments of silence listening for Creator's whisper. Of course, it's not as simple as just sitting in silence and prayer and meditation. Or if I get my first email, first text, or worrying about my agenda or planning my day, serenity is over. It's done. The serenity surrendered and the moment lost. Why? Because I'm no longer present. But we can preserve and protect those sacred moments before we read the news, check our email, before we connect on social media, or check the latest posts from our Facebook friends, many and most of whom we don't really even know at all. Not in the real world, anyway. We can find a way to be fully present, especially in the natural world. I believe that we can live a happier, more fulfilled life, and that can only be found in silence and the sacredness of silence, the true essence of character. To spin a lyric from an old song, silence is golden, but my eyes still see. See the beauty of God's creation in moments of removing ourselves from as much noise as we can muster, opening our eyes and opening our mind, opening our ears and opening our heart, releasing our spirit to find serenity and the grace of serenity of silence. That takes effort, yes. It takes intention and determination in the process, but we can achieve that in a good way, walking always in a sacred manner. quiet, listening. Listening to and for that still, small voice of truth, wisdom, and love. I promise you, as I'm promising myself, that the effort that we put to arrive at that place, that centeredness within you and within me, that we will really understand the assurance that then we shall truly be as one. That is good and valuable truth worth all of the effort it takes to find those sacred moments of silence and the serenity that will bring you much happiness and much joy. I usually do not use as many quotes as I have used in this talk, but they all connect or reconnect the circle, and I find them an essential part of our journey. A journey to the sacred serenity of silence. You can, I can, you will, I will find. We will find them as an essential part of our journey. You can, with effort and intention, get to that place of serenity, but it does require effort and intention. So I encourage you, as I'm encouraging myself, every day, this day, begin to cultivate good habits that promote and provide the serenity that we all so desperately need and desire if we are honest with ourselves. Put forth the effort to daily stand or sit in the silence. I believe we'll be amazed at the serenity we will realize in such a short time by developing the discipline to do so. Silence is the essence of character, or so the old ones say. Aho. That's getting harder and harder to do in this world in which we live. But I believe with all of my being that when we can get closer to those spaces of silence and the serenity that it brings us, that we'll find our mind much clearer. We'll find the world, even as small as it may be within the space of our own home, to be more sacred and more deliberate. And the peace that I'm convinced will come from that will flow over you and flow over me, is worth all of the effort that it takes. So I encourage you today as we move forward from this place to find ways that we can enter that sacred silence outside in the natural world or inside where we live, work, and play. Was that deliberate? Well, that came at the perfect time. But with no offense to that at all. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. But you see how quickly we can be drawn back into, that place of, ooh, and to find those sacred moments of serenity and silence. And I believe we'll be amazed at how our mental health and our spiritual life will improve and increase as we do. So we come now to our time at the altar. Most all of you are familiar with the movement and the flow of the altar and all of the sacraments that are here. For those of you who are new with us today, I would like to point out a couple of things that are new on our altar. These rocks that here and here were gifts that Julia and her husband Jim brought back from a trip that they made recently out west. And these are actually fragments of the Crazy Horse Monument. And we also have, and I'm in the process of putting together a bundle. She collected some sage grass, it looks like, from us there. So, and this is a beautiful piece. This is a gift from Mark. Mark is the rock hound. But here on the altar, we have the floral water, the essence of the earth. Fragrance cleanses our fingers and our lips and brings us connected down into the sacred Mother Earth. We have the tobacco. This, Bonnie, is what we call our letting go bowl or our surrender bowl, where we can take whatever may be troubling us today, whatever we may find that we need to release and let go. Speak that into the tobacco and place it there onto the charcoal and watch the white smoke of surrender make its way to the heart creator. I think that's burning. And we make prayer ties. Are you familiar with prayer ties? Well, all of the sacraments are here on the altar, as always, thanking John and Maria for their dedication and commitment to opening our place and our space, and creating such a sacred altar for us to come and pray. So let's come now. And I think I noticed, Jenny, you brought your flute, or did you bring yours? Rick, you did? Okay. Well, if you'd like.